Is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
Good morning. It is Friday, October 24th, and a lot going on in the world. We've been talking this week, especially with the New York City mayoral race coming up, and the literal communist that is running and has an imam that really is saying just horrible things about America, very anti-American values, how dangerous it is to import the Islamic ideology. And a lot of that is also translating over into what happened a couple of nights ago over in Dublin, with multiple arrests were made. Police vehicles were set on fire as Dublin's riots spill into a second night. That was from Wednesday. In Time magazine, and apparently these riots started Monday night outside the City West Hotel in Snaggart, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a village in County Dublin, after reports that a 10-year-old girl had been sexually assaulted by, as the Times is reporting it, an asylum seeker. Really, this is reportedly an illegal who should have been deported. And that deportation allegedly never occurred. And so somebody who shouldn't have been in the country. And so this is a 26-year-old male suspect who appeared in court on Tuesday and was charged in connection with that assault, which reportedly took place near the hotel. But people are just getting tired of this. People are getting tired of the lack of assimilation to Western civilization, with the lack of border control, and with the fact that all of this entire mentality of these illegals really is to come in and to just simply bring in their culture and foist a lot of crime, frankly, on the populace whose government should be protecting them. And that's true for Ireland. It's true for America. It's true for the United Kingdom that is now majority Muslim. And we just played a clip the other day on this program, earlier this week, where an American woman who had lived for 3 years in London was talking about how dangerous it is and how everybody knows it, but more and more people are wary to say it out loud. And I was listening to a BBC anchor who was just going off on this and saying and confronting this directly, that Islam is a belief system that is wholly incompatible with Western civilization. And so this bears repeating that really it is time to wake up before the Islam appeal becomes more widespread and Sharia law actually takes over. And before we get to our first guest, I want to play this clip that was from a podcast. And the commentator here, who is Martin Cedra, he is apparently a pastor at Echo Church. And he is also on Instagram and all of that. But he was talking about why Islam is gaining ground in the West and what its draws and appeal actually is, and what we need to watch out for. So this is cut 6.
What is the draw of Islam to the West? Why is the West kind of floating over to it?
Yeah.
What is the appeal?
Are Muslims allowed to lie for the sake of spreading Islam? They're coming here and they're saying, yeah, we love you guys, we back you guys, but the moment they are the majority, they will turn and Sharia law will take over. And if Sharia law takes over, women will be beaten. If Sharia law takes over, homosexuals will be chucked off buildings. If Sharia law takes over, pastors will be killed, women will be raped, children will be turned into Muslims, and churches will be bought and turned into mosques, which is what's happening in London. So I think what they're doing now in America is they're practicing taqiyya, where they're lying to your face until you let them in. And once you let them in, they'll take over.
Really, really scary stuff. And that's exactly what's happening in London. And thankfully, at least Ireland seems to be waking up to this. But let's welcome in Brian McCarthy, who is an Irish national. He's also an author at the People's Cube. Brian, this is a really unfortunate tragedy that, this alleged assault of this young 10-year-old girl by someone who shouldn't have even been in the country to begin with. And we're seeing more and more of that in these Western countries that have open border policies that are not protecting their citizens first. So what's going on in Ireland?
I think people have finally had enough. What's happening is it's the same playbook the world over, isn't it? A successful Western country has so-called refugees coming into it who all happen to be male, who all happen to be military aged, who all happen to be wearing nice clothing, nice shoes, and they all get put up in a hotel. Like, when I first came to the United States, I slept in a car in New York City for a couple of weeks, something like that, a place to stay. It does not compute, and people who have paid tax all their lives in Ireland, people who struggle to get government services, are just beginning to ask questions. Why are we bringing in people who have nothing to do with our island, geographically, religiously, culturally, economically, putting them up in hotels? The City West is one of the biggest hotels in Dublin. It's gigantic. So they filled it with people from the third world, some of whom have beliefs, a lot of whom have beliefs that women are property and you can do what you want to them. And now a 10-year-old girl's life is ruined. And the Irish people just had it. Of course, they're all being called far right by the usual suspects, the NGO-funded left in Ireland, which has an absolute grip on everything in Ireland. And that's why they're trying to pass a lot of these EU-sponsored laws for hate speech and internet speech and everything, so that people won't be able to speak out against this type of thing. And the other night in Dublin, it just all kicked off. I mean, there was cars burned. Journalists, two journalistic outfits. I think it was GB News out of Britain, and I think Rebel News out of Canada. Both of their camera people and sound people were assaulted by the cops in Ireland, who just literally bashed anybody who was on the street, even people with press credentials.
Wow. And this is not the first time, even this year, that riots, have broken out across Ireland. And this seems to be for the same issue, which is that the people are tired of open borders. Mm-hmm. And yet this seems to be falling on deaf ears. I mean, what is the status of the leadership and the government there to actually listen to the people saying, we don't want to be in danger. We don't want to fear for our safety. We don't want to have to be concerned for our 10-year-old girls, staying at hotels.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because people have finally woken up. And, in all the years of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, on the island of Ireland, I never saw trouble outside of, Belfast and the north. I never saw anything in the south. But in the last couple of years, there's been 2 major riots in Dublin because of this issue. So it's finally, and the Irish government are the most spineless bunch of people, and I'm glad people are paying attention to it, because I've seen major American Twitter personalities and journalists going, "Who the heck is this?" When the Irish VP, he's what's called a Taoiseach, which is Gaelic. He's an absolute weakling of a man, and they just take their orders from Brussels all the time, and they do whatever Brussels tells them. But finally, the Irish people abroad and people in Ireland have now finally started to step up. There is an Irish, he's a businessman, Declan Ganley. He has a major company here in the United States. There's another guy out of Silicon Valley, Owen McCabe. His company is Intercom. You got Malachy Steenson, who is an Irish politician, and Gavin Pepper. They've all now started to coalesce and push back against this. And, one of Ireland's mottos in Gaelic is, Céad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes. And I like to say to people, we are now at 99,999 welcomes. We're done. Okay? Yeah. We were welcoming when we thought you were coming from a war zone. We were welcoming when we thought you were a refugee. And then after a few years, we noticed, wait a second, you're all in your 20s and 30s. Where are your women and children? You sit around outside these, they call them international protection centres, hotels, drinking, smoking all day, and a bunch of youthful males from a foreign land with nothing to do, and then this stuff happens. So, Irish businessmen and politicians around the world who are not part of the Irish establishment are now getting together. There's another gentleman out of Jakarta, Indonesia, Kieran Kelly. They're starting to gang up on the Irish government, and we are going to push back against the Irish government from outside, because their wallet will be squeezed by people who have influence around the world.
Yeah. And, it just makes so much sense that, for a people, I mean, the Irish sound a lot like Americans who are saying, listen, we're happy to welcome people who assimilate into our culture, who are hardworking, who want to be here for the same reasons that we love being Americans, who maybe are actually running from whether it's religious persecution or actual wars and all of that, but they can't just come in and bring their culture with them. I mean, no civilization can survive that. And yet somehow Ireland and also the UK, I mean, the UK now being majority Muslim, that is really concerning, and that is does not bode well for the United Kingdom. I mean, and you look here in the United States at Dearborn, Michigan, that there are videos at 5 a.m. with the Muslim call to prayer, and you have people like some very notable fake news reporters who are Muslim, who are saying, hey, this is what religious freedom means in America. Well, no, not when it's government sponsored and when it's at 5 a.m. disturbing the peace of everyone else. I mean,
the church bells ring back home on a Sunday. That's it. That's our call to prayer. It's not 5 times a week, or it's not 5 times a day. But like me as an immigrant, I've been here 27 years, and I have found that, the most vindicating thing is, when I tell Americans, like, oh, I came here with like $600 stuffed in my sock and nothing else, and I had to do all of this, and, now I've got a nice place, and, I'm enjoying it. Americans love hearing that because it's a vindication of their system. There's nothing better, actually, I think, when you tell, Americans that, because of your system, I was able to come here with nothing and work, and now I'm part of the system. But you have to, as an immigrant, respect the culture of the place you go. And if I think, when you import highly uneducated, non-skilled people, you're asking for trouble.
Absolutely.
And this is what's happening. I mean, I can go on all day about what's happened in the village where I grew up, the hotel on the edge of the village that has been filled for 25 years. It's going on that this place has been filled with people from the third world who just live there. I'm just like, when is the hotel going to go back to being a hotel? Apparently it's been that way for 25 years. And everybody who has been, berated by the media in Ireland as far right has been saying, if you continue to import these people from the third world who have no values that align with any of our values, we're going to have what happened in England with all the Rotherham rape gangs and everything. And the left has said, no, you're just a fascist, you're just a Nazi. And now it's begun to happen. And I'm just at a loss as when they'll never be realised, because the lefty ideology is everything. So if it affects or damages their ideology, they still will not admit it.
And I'm speaking with Brian McCarthy, who's an Irish national and author at The People's Cube. And, you're absolutely right that if somebody comes into a country, they're expected to follow the customs and culture and respect the nation whose boundaries, they are now bound by. I mean, this is why we have sovereignty. This is why we have nations, why we have borders, and, why the United States at least used to. And I mean, in practice, we still do. But I think, the actual practice, we don't require this, that you need to pledge actual allegiance to the United States and the government for which it stands, right? And that is a normal thing in nations, and yet it seems like it's only the Western nations that have become so weak that we've bought into this whole narrative that, hey, we can have a globalist mentality. I mean, none of these Muslim predominant nations would allow what they're doing to the United States. So why is it only the Western nations that are, as President Trump would say, the suckers and losers?
Yeah, I that's a rabbit hole I've gone down, and I usually pin it on the AWFLs, which is the affluent, white, liberal, suburban, urban females. It's an acronym. I think it's suicidal empathy, and even from other Muslim countries, from the Emirates and places like that. Those people have been warning us for years who we're bringing in. I mean, there's a couple of prominent Muslims I follow on Twitter who have been screaming from the rooftops saying the people you are bringing into Ireland and the UK and the West are not good. We won't even let them into our place. So, again, it's suicidal empathy, and I think it's people wanting to feel good about themselves.
Yeah, well, they're not going to feel good about themselves, when it's themselves and their daughters and their wives that are targeted, and we're seeing a lot of those effects, unfortunately, here in the U.S., which is why at least the majority of voters were very happy to see President Trump's policies work. But we've got to leave it here. So much more we could talk about. Brian McCarthy, really appreciate your time this morning, and we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
Hey, my name is Wesley Wildman.
And I'm Walker Wildman.
And we're brothers, and our family have been leading tours to the land of the Bible for more than 30 years.
Coming up in March of 2026, we would love for you to join us for something very special, a Footsteps of Paul tour, a journey through Greece.
We'll walk exactly where the Apostle Paul walked, through Athens, ancient Corinth, Philippi, and Thessalonica.
You'll enjoy unforgettable experiences and meaningful fellowship with believers and with Wesley and Walker.
And we'll eat well, laugh a lot, and yes, eat well again. And most importantly, we will grow in our faith as the Bible comes alive before your eyes. You'll get to see the very things that we read about or that your pastor talks about in church.
The Footsteps of Paul tour is March 17th through the 24th, 2026.
Register today at wildmangroup.com.
That's wildmangroup.com. We can't wait to see you there.
If you are 65 or older, you know this. Inflation is hitting everyone hard right now, especially when it comes to healthcare. Over the last 10 years, healthcare costs have skyrocketed by, get this, 230%. If you have Medicare Parts A and B, you know there are still out-of-pocket expenses like deductibles and copayments, and they really add up. But here's some good news. MediShare 65 Plus is designed to fill in those gaps and help protect you from rising healthcare costs. At only $99 per month up to age 75, you get peace of mind at a price you can afford. And MediShare is trusted, too. It's been around 30 years. It's not some big impersonal thing. It's a community of people helping each other, business owners, pastors, retirees. People love it. MediShare 65 Plus just makes sense. To learn more, give them a call. They're great to talk to. They'll offer to pray with you each time you call, too. Call now. 833-45-BIBLE. That's 833-45-BIBLE. 833-45-BIBLE.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Stern. Stand by for news and commentary next. Jurupa Valley High School in California has been making national headlines for all the wrong reasons. That's because the girls' volleyball team has been cheating all season long, including a boy on their volleyball squad. Jurupa Valley no doubt had a great record going into the state playoffs, but that's because other schools refused to compete. They won 10 matches by forfeit. The school also facing a lawsuit filed by 2 current and 1 former teammate of Mr. A.B. Hernandez. Now, Hernandez is a boy who identifies as a girl, and he's been allowed to compete alongside the female athletes. Also a state champion track star, again competing against girls. But it turns out Mr. Hernandez was no match for the ladies of Valencia High School. The young man and his teammates were sent packing in round 1 of the state playoffs in straight sets. Imagine that, a boy getting beat by a girl. How embarrassing. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back, and we're still talking about this topic that we really need to grapple with as the West and as a society that is not only founded on but dedicated to the propositions of liberty, truth, and the Judeo-Christian worldview, which means that we are necessarily wholly incompatible with Islam and Sharia law, which is a belief system. It is a lens by which they view the world and reality, which is far different than Americans do. And you ask the question, of course, well, doesn't this all fall under the banner of religious freedom? Well, yes, individuals in America can choose to believe in the Muslim faith and to obviously an extent just like Christians. There are still limitations on the practice of religion. There is obviously free exercise. We have all of those legal battles and all of that. But what we're talking about is the legislative power of government and by whose authority they legislate. Well, it is not the Muslim faith. It is not Islam. It is not Sharia law. It is not even the U.S. Constitution. Yes, the U.S. Constitution vests the specific limited powers and is basically a codification as our highest law in the land of the divine authority that comes from the God of the Bible, the God of creation, Yahweh, the God whose power is delegated to government in very specific and limited ways to then exercise that legitimately. That truth is what our nation was founded on, and it is recognized in the Declaration and then further codified into law in our U.S. Constitution. This is why, fundamentally, Sharia law is completely incompatible with the American system of government. You would literally have to completely overthrow the United States of America, completely shred our U.S. Constitution, and make it wholly ineffective and unenforceable anymore in order for Sharia law to prevail. And I'm hopeful that maybe some Christian lawyers will recognize this and fight these battles before it is too late. But the concerning thing about Islam and a nation whose borders are not protected, thankfully, currently, we at least have President Trump, DHS and all of that, and ICE that is protecting the law, is that Islam is seeking to take over the West. And these radical ideas that are from predominantly Islamic countries are seeking to take over the West. And the same pastor that I played in the first segment was also on Charlie Kirk's show previously and reposted, this great clip about Islam taking over. And I want you to listen to this and just how prophetic Charlie Kirk was and why this call in this moment is so serious for Western civilization to continue to persist. And it's not just Western civilization, by the way. It's not just because we prefer the West to the East or whatever. It's that truth itself needs to prevail. The Judeo-Christian worldview is a lens by which we view reality and by which we understand that God, the God of the Bible, the true and living God, the only one, the way, the truth, and the life, vested rights to individuals that are pre-political. They pre-exist any government, including the Islamic system of government, including the American system of government. And our founders recognized that truth prevails and then built a society upon that truth. So this isn't just a preference. This isn't just my belief system versus yours and I'm American because, whatever. This is all about truth, and that truth must continue to prevail. So listen to Pastor Sidra and Charlie Kirk.
The United Kingdom will be a Muslim-majority country in the next 20 years.
1,000%.
London already is.
While Christians are aborting their babies, killing their babies, making their kids gay and homosexual, getting the rest of the young people who happen to escape abortion, they trans themselves and cut and butcher their body parts. Islam is spreading like a virus. Have you been to London Stan recently?
Now, the most common baby name in London is
Muhammad.
what? Most common baby name in Dublin is what?
Muhammad.
The most common baby name in Copenhagen is
Muhammad.
It is a religion of conquest, and it is not a conspiracy theory. It is a stated doctrine of the Hadith.
Literally.
To take over new lands.
We need to stop this lie that Islam that took over Egypt, took over Israel, and Israel took the nation back, that took over Syria, that took over Syria, that took over Algeria, took over Jordan, that took over Saudi Arabia, that took over Iran, that took over Afghanistan.
And now all of Europe, and Indonesia, and most of Africa.
And Malaysia.
It is a religion of conquest.
Really, really scary. And this is why the Qatar influence is also incredibly dangerous. And we spoke on this program, and also I was a guest on Today's Issues, and raised this with the rest of our American Family Association family, that this is a really serious issue, that Qatar has been pouring billions of dollars into America, and specifically into American universities, to radicalize our young people in order to be more accepting to Islamic beliefs. And Qatar is a predominantly Muslim country, and Islam is the official state religion. Here's the breakdown. Around 65 to 70% of the total population is Muslim, though the exact numbers vary due to the large expatriate workforce. But the majority of Qatari citizens are Sunni Muslims, similar to Saudi Arabia's religious tradition. And non-Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, make up the remainder of the population, but Islamic law or Sharia law influences Qatar's legal system, social norms, and public life. And this is why when we are allowing the infiltration not just of persons themselves, of people who will come and be part of our society or try to take it over or to express their culture in our land, but also when you have money that is being given to affect the ideology of the people here. Those are two different and very different types of influences, and I would say harm, that are ultimately toward the same goal, which is to take over this nation. And we need to wake up and to stop this. And this is one of the very few blind spots that I see with the Trump administration, where Donald Trump, as a great and brilliant negotiator, actually thinks, though, that the Qatari royal family and all of these Islamic leaders actually want the same things that westernized countries do, that they value private property, that they value peace and safety, that they value religious freedom, that they value the constitutional republic that protects all of these rights that come from the God of the Bible, the God our creator. They don't. And Trump has to understand that when you negotiate with someone who has a radically different worldview and belief system, you're not negotiating with someone who views the world and has the same value set that you do. And I think on some level, he probably gets that. I mean, he gets that there are different motivators. And this is why, you have different valuations of businesses. That's why value is a very arbitrary rubric, and not just in, general economic terms, but even in terms of worldview. A valuation is very different. This is why the left can get away with, without guilt, saying that they don't value an unborn human. Why? Because their belief system does not value an unborn human life in the same way that my worldview, that reality, the truth of reality, tells us that we have to and that we should. But this is what we're up against, because the ideology and the worldview that is trying to invade our culture through not only illegal immigrants, but also through dollars, through funding, through a lot of these so-called peace deals, through some of these executive orders, all of this, I mean, Charlie Kirk, again, was so prophetic on this issue that when we look to what's going on in the United Kingdom, when we look at what's going on in Ireland, when we look at what's going on in Dearborn, Michigan, I mean, this has come already to our shores, but we have to ensure that this ideology does not ever replace the truth of the reality to which we're presented. And again, it's not just my view versus the Muslims' perspective. This is all about truth. It's about the truth of reality and the truth of who we are as human beings made in the image of the one true God. And how do we know that Christianity is true? Well, do you want the true answer or the false one? That's always what it comes down to. I am not a Christian because I prefer this belief system or this faith. I am a Christian because it is the only explanation for the reality to which we're presented and has the answers for why we find ourselves in a fallen, sinful, evil world, and actually has solutions, which is through the redemptive work of Christ alone. We have got to stand up for that truth. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis in the Morning.
We don't have to be like the 10 that said it can't be done, it's too big, the Giants are too big. We need to be like Joshua and Caleb and say, you know what, there are giants. This is a massive problem. When you have a nation that is ignorant of the principles that produce a free society, start where you can. It's the only way I know. It's a little bit at a time.
Join Walker Wildman and Rick Green as they tackle today's issues from a biblical and a constitutional perspective. At the Core, 1 p.m. Central weekdays on AFR.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins.
You look at 3 of the 4 justices there in Colorado that voted to remove him from the ballot. They all came from Ivy League schools, schools that had been created as divinity schools. What a picture of the apostasy in America when it comes to the church.
Stay informed with Tony Perkins and his guests on Washington Watch, weekdays at 4 p.m. Central on AFR, or catch up anytime with the podcast at afr.net.
Now these are the words of the letter which Jeremiah the prophet sent from Jerusalem to the rest of the elders of the exile, the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Jeremiah 29:11 is one of the most quoted verses in Scripture, albeit usually out of context and misunderstood. Something that is often missed is that it is one sentence from an entire letter God sent to exiled Jews in Babylon. What should be noted here is that even in the midst of judgment, God still provided guidance and instruction to his people, anticipating their return to him.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
What if healthcare could be more than bills and bureaucracy? What if it could reflect faith, foster community, and offer spiritual support? At Redeem HealthShare Ministry, the mission goes beyond medical bills. It's about honoring Christ and embracing healthcare that aligns with Christian values. Redeem members share medical expenses through monthly contributions, supporting one another in a Christ-centered community. It's not insurance, it's believers helping believers through financial support and prayer. And Redeem HealthShare provides freedom for members to select the doctors, hospitals, and treatments that are right for them. No networks, no restrictions, just faith-driven care. From everyday checkups to unexpected medical emergencies, Redeem offers flexible programs and encouragement rooted in Scripture. Because your healthcare should reflect your faith, not compromise it. More at redeemhealthshare.org.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, to round out a Friday, I really hate to do this, but we have to talk about Candace Owens. And I don't like to talk about Candace Owens because she wants everybody to talk about her, and I don't like to feed into that. But when there is something that is so ridiculous, so utterly absurd, that so many people are falling for, I feel an obligation and a responsibility to you, the listener, to talk about it and to parse through just the utter trash that she posts, because I honestly don't even know why people even listen to anything that she says anymore, because I think that she has proven herself to be utterly untrustworthy, totally self-centered, completely antithetical to, anything deserving of attention. And she's using her former friendship with Charlie Kirk over the last few weeks since his murder to amplify herself. And that is beyond reprehensible. I think it's utterly disgusting. And so with that kind of intro and caveat, this is the message that we have to talk about today that she posted earlier this week. She says this on X: "Don't worry about the gag order in the Charlie Kirk case. I plan to violate it on the world's behalf. The things I've discovered this past week are enough to burn the house down. Yes, Charlie was betrayed by everyone." So this is just in keeping, in context with everything that she has alleged, which has been that the young man, the 22-year-old who was arrested and who is awaiting a trial and has charges, he's due back in court later this month. It's her contention overall that this is the wrong person and he's just the fall guy. This is a total cover-up because we can't trust any government institutions. And she's preying on the institutional questioning and the undermining of the legitimacy of institutions that we saw during COVID, which was correct, right? To say that we need to not just trust the so-called experts because they're the state designated experts. We need to actually question what their positions are, and especially when it's leftists and, frankly, idiots like Biden that are running these institutions. But now we have our people there. We have people. I mean, I personally have known Dan Bongino for over a decade, who is the deputy director of the FBI now, and who was personally in Arizona, saw the evidence, saw Charlie's body. Saw horrific stuff that I wish he had not, but he was there. And I know that my friend Dan has integrity, and he's bringing that integrity back to the FBI, and would not be part of something knowingly that is a conspiracy or a cover-up. And none of this makes sense. But of course, she's blaming Israel. Candace is blaming, anybody that Charlie opposed, like literally anything other than just, this was a deranged 22-year-old that unfortunately got a shot off that killed Charlie Kirk. Because if it's that simple, then nobody would be listening to her rants, right? Then it wouldn't be some, I have secret knowledge that's enough to burn the house down and all of this, ridiculous fervor. So let's parse through what's actually going on here. And joining me for this discussion, with my deepest apologies to my guest, Gerard Folletti, who is senior counsel of the Lawfare Project. Gerard, I'm so sorry that we have to talk about Candace Owens and her utter ridiculousness, but here we are. And I do think it's important because we need to combat her insanity with actual facts. And so let's start first with this whole gag order, because I'm not aware at all that Candace herself is under any kind of gag order, because she's not a witness to this case. She's inserting herself where she doesn't need to be or deserve to be. And so is she just talking about, basically violating it by proxy, or, what is even going on here?
Well, that's an excellent question. There was a gag order imposed in this case by the judge, but the gag order applies to the prosecutors. It applies to the defense attorneys. It applies to witnesses. It applies to Turning Point USA. It does not apply to Candace Owens, who has absolutely nothing to do with this case. Her only involvement here is that she is trying to inject herself to get another 15 minutes of fame off the tragic incident that took the life of Charlie Kirk. So by starting her message by saying, don't worry about the gag order, she plans to violate it, that's nice, but she's not violating something that doesn't even apply to her.
Right. And so, but she does this just to generate this sort of hyperbole that is like, oh, wow, she has something that is so explosive that she's willing to violate the law. And, it's creating this overly dramatic effect that's not even grounded in reality. So, so she's saying she plans to violate it on the world's behalf. This is just utter nonsense. But, what we know about this case overall, everything that at least is in the public domain with the FBI, what the Utah law enforcement has revealed to the public, is pretty conclusive. I don't personally have any questions about the guilt of this young man just based on what we know. Now, obviously, he deserves a day in court, a jury trial if he so chooses, all of that. But the evidence is pretty overwhelming here, is it not?
Well, it is. Look, he is entitled to his day in court, and he is entitled to be adjudicated by a jury of his peers beyond a reasonable doubt. But for now, there is absolutely more than enough probable cause to believe that he committed this act and is rightly being charged with it. All of the evidence that's been put forward in the public domain supports this. And there's nothing here that suggests any sort of conspiracy. Now, it'll be interesting to see down the line what's revealed about his actual motives, especially given his living relationship and the groups that he may have been associated with. And who knows, maybe there is something to be said for some kind of a conspiracy involving those groups, but that's not something that Candace Owens would be privy to. That's something that will come out during trial, and I think the American public will see that for itself. Right now, what we're seeing is someone, Candace Owens, who knows the right trigger phrases to use to get clicks. Essentially, she's posting clickbait. That's all this is. It's not looking at the evidence. It's not looking at what we know or what we believe we know. It's inventing facts to suit her narrative.
Yeah, and that's what truly disgusts me, is that she is using Charlie's death to amplify her own profile instead of talking about it like, you know, the rest of us who are in media who, who find the murder just absolutely tragic and horrific and very personal. I mean, you know, for me, as listeners know, I mean, this was literally watching a friend get murdered. I mean, it's not even just hearing about it after the fact. Like, we have it on video, which is just horrible. For his family, for his close friends. I mean, even as close as I was to him, which isn't as close as, some at Turning Point and obviously his own family. I mean, it was traumatic for me. And yet she's using this to prop up herself and to have clickbait, as you suggest. And that's disturbing enough. And frankly, I think she needs help. I think her husband needs to stage an intervention, but, that's just me. But in terms of actual harm, potentially, in some of the comments, especially to this last post about, violating this gag order and, what she's discovered, blah, blah, Charlie was betrayed by everyone. This has had some real world consequences, because I had on Attorney General James Uthmeier from my home state of Florida, who said that he had his office is in the process of extraditing someone who'd been arrested in Texas for death threats against two other friends of mine, Seth Dillon and Josh Hammer, who were at an event with Charlie shortly before his death. And that this individual is so insane as to think that somehow these friends of Charlie's were actually complicit in his murder, allegedly, is what this report goes on to say. And one of the 5 people this guy was following was Candace Owens. And so, you have to kind of connect the dots here and say this is having real world consequences when people believe her derangement and are actually thinking that they need to go and enact some kind of vigilante justice because the FBI and the Utah law enforcement isn't. That should have, in my view, real world consequences for Candace.
I think you're right about that, because what she's posting is really no different, except for tone, than what you would imagine Antifa posts or what pro-Hamas people post on the internet. It really is very disturbing, and it does affect people. It affects the way people think. And when you have people who are a little bit unhinged to begin with, and you have posts like this that reinforce their unhinged beliefs, then you have real life threats to people like Josh Hammer, who could very well have a defamation case, by the way, against Candace Owens for some of the things that she's posted. But this is the problem. She's taking no responsibility for what she's posting. She's just taking the attitude that anything goes and doesn't seem to care that she is putting people at risk and that she is attempting to ruin people's reputations. She's literally the one who is burning the house down, but she's burning everyone's house down. People who are innocent, people who have nothing to do with Charlie Kirk, people who have nothing to do with anything. And that's really the disturbing part. She's dragging people into this who have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and people who were actually Charlie's friends. I mean, imagine, I can't imagine just how terrible it would be to not only have, your friend get murdered, but then have somebody as deranged as Candace then openly and publicly somehow blame you for it as if that was some kind of, as if you had some kind of involvement. And I really hope that people like Josh Hammer, have a defamation case and that somebody can basically shut up Candace, not in a cancel culture kind of censorship way, but in the way that the law actually provides for. Because these kind of wild I'm just asking questions. Oh, I'm just speculating. I'm just saying what I think everybody else knows. I mean, this does have real world consequences. And so, how likely is it, do you think, that somebody like a Josh Hammer or even, law enforcement could potentially, say, hey, this is not appropriate? I mean, the FBI in Utah is probably thinking, you know what, if we end up putting a gag order on her, that'll just make her even more immensely popular. So it's a frustrating lack of ability to rein in somebody who is so delusional that you don't just want to feed into their narrative.
Well, I think that when you look at what she's saying, it's provable that she's acting with reckless disregard for the truth of what she's saying. And if you look at case law, if you look at whether it's defamation or what needs to be shown in order to get a gag order, she certainly meets the criteria, and it's a high bar. But she is posting things that are demonstrably false, and she is recklessly disregarding the falsity of what she's saying. And that's problematic. And I think that someone does need to step in. Now, the other option, of course, and I was thinking about this earlier, is look at Britney Spears. I mean, a lot of states do have mental health evaluations or temporary involuntary commitments when you have someone who could be a danger to themselves and others. And here we need to look at that option as well, because this is not someone who is well in the mind.
Yeah, I really hope that she gets help, because I think she is clearly, something is going on that she needs, she needs help, and she certainly doesn't need to be listened to. So I agree with you on that as well. And Gerard Folletti, who's a senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, my special guest this morning, in terms of other potential real-world harm, there were some people in the comments, and I think this is an apt observation, that Candace is putting out all of these other theories, and it may have the practical effect of tainting the jury pool to have more of a question mark over the facts and the actual evidence that's going to be presented at trial. Because, this is a worldwide case and people are going to be paying attention to it. And it seems like, according, to some of the people in the comments, which makes sense to me, that it seems like she is just trying to trigger a mistrial, which would then feed into her narrative like, see, this isn't as ironclad as we thought, and I was right all along. Is that a potential in your mind?
Well, it's always a potential, but that's a hard one to address, because there is the freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and these are things that are not taken lightly. So it's very hard to impose a gag order on someone who has absolutely nothing to do with the case to prevent them from mouthing off their opinions or their thoughts, however damaging they may be. I think that ultimately things like this will play into the voir dire process when you're looking at a jury pool, to ask them where they get their news, whether they know who Candace Owens is, whether they've seen these types of posts. I think that the criminal justice system does a pretty good job of addressing some of these potential biases. But at the end of the day, this is a disturbing thing, because we're nowhere near close to selecting a jury. And what Candace Owens is doing is adding to a conversation that is casting doubt on everything. And that makes it hard for anyone to get a fair trial. That makes it harder for jurors to be impartial. And that just really poisons the atmosphere about what we trust and who we trust.
Yeah, so well said. And, it will be so infuriating, frankly, if during the voir dire process, if Candace is mentioned, and I think, prosecutors would be wise to ask these types of questions if people have seen, this, what their thoughts are on it, to ensure that there isn't, some of this kind of bias. But that would just feed into her narrative, just like people talking about it, which is why, I hate to talk about this, but on the other hand, we need to talk about it because it's something that is so damaging to the overall process. I mean, what happened to just simply leaving law enforcement to do their job, especially when there's no legitimate reason, no rational reason at this point why we need to question that law enforcement in Utah, as well as our own people in the FBI, are doing their jobs. I mean, what does it say about the culture when the extreme wing of the right just doesn't ever believe the narrative? It's like there always has to be some hidden dark secret that somebody else is exposing. And I mean, I feel like that's the rise of the social media platforms, is that everybody tries to have new information just to get these clicks.
Look, I think History has shown that regardless of political affiliation, there are a fair number of people out there who are predisposed to conspiracy theories. People who think that the cloud in the sky is not just a cloud in the sky, but is something else. And these people live off of posts like what Candace Owens put out there, like what other people put out there. The more outlandish, the better. It's just the way they're predisposed towards viewing the world. And there's nothing really that we can do about that except talk about it and show that that's not what the facts show, and help the majority of people not go down rabbit holes that they don't need to be going down. Because ultimately, the facts as we know them don't suggest a conspiracy. If at some point the facts become different or there are new facts revealed, then we can evaluate what they say. But without any knowledge whatsoever, just to start believing in conspiracies, that makes no sense.
Yeah, well said. Well, Jared, I really appreciate your comments and, addressing this so directly. And, I would just say to our AFR family, this is why we need to always be wise and discerning in the voices that we listen to. Always compare and contrast this with facts, with truth, and with an intent to determine and discern and rightly divide what is true and what is just hyperbole and what is just drama and what people are saying just for their own purposes and whether they have ulterior motives. And so, I've just relegated Candace kind of, to the failed conservatives. And as listeners know as well, I think that we as an overall movement kind of laid hands on her too quickly to say, okay, she had one great point, one valid point, which is that Black people do not have to vote Democrat just because they are Black. Great point, absolutely. But then we attributed to her a knowledge and an ability to advocate on behalf of all conservative principles that I think was very misplaced, and we're seeing, unfortunately, the fruits of that. So hopefully we will be wiser in the future. So, closing comments, Gerard, of where you think all of this is going in terms of, beyond Candace, but, kind of this rise of, the internet commentator. I feel like at least some gatekeeping that we used to have, like you had to actually be credible to get on a platform or to get, an opinion piece published. That somebody had to believe the message that we were saying. And obviously, there's the fake news media that has their own agenda. But some gatekeeping at least used to be good, where now in the virtual public square, anybody can go viral for any stupid and nonsensical reason. And I think there's a huge danger to that. And really, it just comes down to policing ourselves and saying, okay, is this person, in my view, willing, is this person rational, and am I willing to listen to what they're saying? And we just need to be more discerning, I think, than ever before.
I think you're absolutely right about the need to be discerning and the need to think critically and not accept everything at face value, even when it's something that you normally sympathize or agree with the person. Because ultimately, it's not just a person. A person you can think is trustworthy, but they can get things wrong. So we always want to look at the underlying facts. Consider what people say as opinion unless it's backed up by facts. And those you can look at from multiple angles. If CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, American Family Radio are all saying the same thing, then more likely than not, it's true. But if it's only one source or there's no source, then we have to be very skeptical about what we see. So whether it's Candace Owens or anyone else, verify what they're saying. Someone may be more trustworthy, but always take it with a grain of salt and look for the facts that back up what people claim.
Absolutely. Well, really well said. Well, we have to end it there, but Gerard Folletti, really appreciate it. You can follow him on X at Gerard Folletti for all of his great takes. This is why we bring him on the program so frequently for this kind of analysis as well as legal analysis. So I really appreciate that. Everyone have a great weekend. And as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast